Continue to look back at the legacy of former President George H.W. Bush and the 1989 U.S. invasion of Panama. I'd like to go back to the 1992 award-winning documentary, The Panama Deception. In this clip, community leader Rafael Olivardia and investigative journalist Robert Knight talk about U.S. military atrocities in Panama. We hear first from Olivardia.
There were many Panamanian troops at the Balboa concentration camp. They didn't seem to know what was going on. They were sitting on the grass with their arms and feet tied with plastic bands. I, along with many other people from El Chorrillo, witnessed their execution right in front of us. 8 of the soldiers at the entrance were executed by U.S. troops.
A Spanish news photographer who, in the early moments, was able to get a picture of bodies lined up in the morgue, was subsequently shot under very strange circumstances. There was not a conflict, but according to the reports of colleagues, an American soldier just took aim and shot him down. What happened in Panama is a hidden horror. Many of the bodies were bulldozed into piles and immolated in the slums where they were collected. Other bodies were left in the garbage chutes of the poor projects in which they died from the shooting, from the artillery, from the machine guns, from the airborne attacks. Others were said to have been pushed into the ocean.
And so at every stage, the United States was, and it continues to deny its responsibility.
Talk about the community, the neighborhood that was hit the hardest. We're talking a bomb every few minutes, massive bombing of Chorrillos.
So El Chorrillo is a poor neighborhood located in Panama City, and it is also the site of the Comandancia, the headquarters of the military. What the United States claimed is that it was doing a surgical strike, but it became very obvious that a whole neighborhood was put up in flames and was being destroyed in the invasion. And that meant that civilians were being targeted indiscriminately. And that's what's important about the Commission's findings, is that they did find civilians having been targeted indiscriminately, and that the United States was not taking the precautions necessary. It was acting in a very reckless and an arbitrary way in how it was trying to meet its military objectives. And under international law, that's prohibited.
And Panama also became the place where the United States tested some of its newest weaponry. The B-1, the stealth bomber, was first used in combat in Panama as well?
That's correct. And so that also struck fear in the population because there was all this unusual weaponry that was being used. It was also the first time that the Humvee was being used as well, which replaced the military Jeep. There was all sorts of ways in which the population was being intimidated as part of this process. And because so many of these neighborhoods were the poorest, were the places where, Black and brown Panamanians lived, they could be ignored and they could be marginalized.
Let's go back to the Oscar-winning documentary, The Panama Deception.
The Pentagon used Panama as a testing ground for newly developed high-tech weapons, such as the stealth fighter, the Apache attack helicopter, and laser-guided missiles. There are also reports that can't be explained, indicating the use of experimental and unknown weaponry.
Nosotros tenemos testimonio de personas combatientes que murieron.
We have testimony about combatants who died literally melted with their guns as a result of a laser. We know of automobiles that were cut in half by these lasers, of atrocities committed by weapons that fire poison darts which produce massive bleeding.
That clip from The Panama Deception ends with University of Panama professor Cecilio Simon.